Hello, everyone. Our special guest today is Haim Mazar. He is a well-established composer of film and television. And today we talk about his latest film score, Scary Movie. We also dive into his approach to scoring film and telling story with music. Enjoy. Thank you for taking time to do this. Super excited to talk with you. And I'm a music, that's kind of like my background originally. I'm now a filmmaker, writer, director, but a lifetime of loving music. I know you started off like with piano when you're younger. At some point, when did this strike you as this means something to me? This is important to me. It's not just an activity.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for having me on the show and expressing interest. I never take it for granted, when people are interested in film music and let alone what I do. So, thank you. I think I really have like kind of like one very strong memory of like when kind of the bug hit me, if you will, and that's from a very early age of about 5 or 6 when I was at a birthday party, and the entertainment was a keyboard player that showed up with what I now know as a digital workstation keyboard that kind of allows you to create an entire track on it. And he was kind of playing tunes throughout the party, and at some point he was doing this Guns N' Roses song, and he started layering all these different parts and guitars and drums all from his MIDI keyboard, all completely by ear. And I remember just like seeing him work and being completely blown away by it. And I asked my mom the next day to buy me a keyboard, like a Casio
Okay.
keyboard. And then shortly after that, there was like a thing, like a talent show or something like that in my school. And I remember I brought that keyboard and I used like all the different demo options and like things that would kind of create quick cue. I was really scoring the event and kind of providing what I now call, play on and play off music, like you do in award shows when people come in and out of stage. I was totally doing that. And I think what I enjoyed about that is the feeling that I can kind of sit behind a keyboard and
Yeah.
create this atmosphere, almost like a DJ, and you're a little hidden, like you're not main stage. And I like that idea, I guess, as a young child, like manipulating people's feelings from the sideways, and that I think that's what kind of got me into it. And then I was also very obsessed with music production, and I was like doing like tape to tape recordings, and like my dad got me a little stereo and immediately like hooked up like all the speakers I could find around the house. And I have pictures of that as a kid, like sitting and like doing recording things from the radio. So then I found out I was pretty good at it. Like music came in very naturally, almost as like a first language. So it kind of developed from there. I started playing that keyboard, and shortly after I moved on to piano. I had a great piano teacher, and sorry, yeah, it kind of rolled from there. So that's my very early memory. And then there were like a few things that happened in between that kind of made it like, all right, this is my calling, and it's really like now I'm working at it. It was
Yeah.
kind of a thing. Yeah.
There's also highs and lows with this because we all know any form of artistry, it's never like this easy, oh, this just happened. You may have that natural blessed part of you that has that talent or whatnot or the spark, and then it's developing the skill. So did you like on your journey of like going into up till maybe your big break or that moment where you're like, hey, this is my career? Did you ever have a moment where you're like, what am I doing? Feel a little lost here. Am I doing the right decisions? Did you ever have that moment?
Absolutely, many times.
Yeah, okay.
I would lie to you if I said
This is
otherwise.
a therapy session.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that, it's really kind of like a twofold thing because there's I mean, first off, when you're a musician, you're a freelance, it's like a freelance business. So there's that aspect which is kind of like scary on its own, whether you're a restaurant owner or whatever, whatever your business may be, running your own business and having no, there's no HR and there's no you want retirement, you better save up, and that's scary. And it's also like it's a very unpredictable business. The music business is not the nicest business to be in general.
Yeah.
So that's one part, and then there's the part of like trying to be a musician, that's kind of like a very abstract concept, and it's scary, and it is difficult, and it is scary financially, and and there's a lot of volatility involved, and it can be like the most terrifying thing, but on the other side, it's the most rewarding thing, really. So yeah, I've definitely had many times where I question my choices, or will I be okay, or what am I doing, especially now that I'm a
Mm.
dad and I have three kids and in a house, and and it's not just you anymore. Like, people kind of rely on what you do. So yeah, it's scary, but you can't overthink it either. You have to really follow your heart, and I do think at the end of the day, people who are doing it professionally are not doing it for money reasons. They're doing it because they're very passionate about it, and there must be something strong enough about that passion that translates to other people. And you're also willing to put in the hard work, and a word that a lot of people don't like to talk about, it's the sacrifice. Because you can really do almost everything you want to. I mean, there's examples in the world of people doing incredible, like the mother that lifts the truck, right? If for
Right.
kids,
Yeah.
you can do everything. The question is, what are you willing to put up for it, and what's the price you're willing to pay for it? When people say things are impossible, they're not really impossible. It just, it's a matter of, is it worth the price? you know and when it comes to being a musician, it comes with a price. You have to work really hard, and your feelings might get hurt, or your dreams might
Right.
get shattered, and you might not have time to be with your family and your friends as much as you want. So it really does come with sacrifices. But again, this is where you have to, people that have that burning feeling and the passion, the true passion, they make it work. And then it's really a question of finding a balance, because you have to have a balance in your life. You can't just be all in on music. I mean, people did that, but they don't last too long.
When you get those self kind of intrusive thoughts, like whether it's on a piece for a scene, like I'm not so sure, yeah, the director and we're lining up well, but still I'm not inspired right now, or I can't find this, or a criticism, or like, what are some good advice for people in any walks of this, whether composers, filmmakers, or just any other vocation? What is some good advice that you have helped you out balancing that out, like with family and work and going through all these different things, like criticism and whatnot, that kept you grounded? Is it a matter of just like, hey, just that's life, get back to work? Or like, what are some straightforward things to do?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I really like to try to always remind myself to stay grounded and always keep some sort of perspective about things. I always say that, like, there's three things in life that matter. They're not necessarily in this order, but it's health, family, and friends. And everything else is really a bonus when you think about it. You can really be okay in life with those three things. And you better take care of those three things.
Yeah.
And when you remember that's helpful. That's sort of like an anchor. If you have anxiety, for example, which I do have some anxiety, that thought, it could be very comforting, and knowing that, like, things are going to be okay. So in my situation, it's just music, or it's just a movie. Now, it's true that you really care about that, and it becomes more. It's a very important thing, especially when you spend a lot of time working and crafting something. Which kind of brings me to the second thing, which is, remembering this part of the perspective, is that we're in a bubble. So you need to get out of the bubble occasionally. This
Yeah.
is true on a macro level, and on all levels. It's important to, like, get out of the studio, put your feet on some grass, and take a walk outside, breathe some air, let your brain, go on a run, things like that, that literally, have a chemical effect on your brain, and help you see things more clearly. Sleep, get a good night's sleep once in a while. It's hard to get a good night's sleep when you're working on a tight schedule. But there is a point where you could argue that I mean, it's not an argument. You just need to be aware of it. That there is a point where you become too tired, where your per minute or per hour, result whether it's like writing a certain amount of music or revising a certain amount of film, you're just not being. It's better. You'd be better off to get a good night's sleep, and tomorrow you can bang it out in 2 hours instead of spending 5 hours now trying to make something when you're too tired. So it's a little bit like sports. You got to know when to, coach, put me in and put me out. So you have to have that control. And also, I would say this is also true creatively. When you work on something, especially in music and in film, we tend to look at something over and over and over again. And at some point, your brain is starting to hear it in a different way. If you hear the same thing over and over again, your brain is going to start accepting certain things about it and literally not hear other things. So then what happens is that if you listen to it the next day on your car stereo or something like that, you'd be like, oh, I don't remember mixing the vocals so loud. Or, that part, when that comes in and that part of the song really doesn't feel right. So again, it's a matter of perspective and allowing some air and letting things breathe and then coming back to them. And the other thing that also happens is that
Hmm.
things tend to sink and settle. I learned that when I was studying piano, and I would learn these complicated classical pieces, and you practice them, and then eventually you try to memorize them. And you really start memorizing them when you don't think about it. They just like kind of soak into your muscle memory and into your body. And then you get to a point where you get to play it pretty well or maybe even perfect, but you're not really playing it the best way possible. It's a little bit like wine. That's the point where you want to leave the piece and come back to it even as late as like a couple of months later. And then when you come back to it, there's a little bit of a learning curve to kind of get it back in your fingers, but that's a very quick process. And then what happens is that you just play it so much better because the music sunk into you and everything is kind of like settled in like fine wine. And that's when you really, really know the piece and you're in comfort with it. And that's true about composition. Composition is the same way, or painting or art, it's all the same way. Improvisation in jazz is in the same way. Composition is really improvisation in slow motion, but
Okay,
you
yeah.
you're trying to create the same thing. You're trying to create this, fun ride. Like, okay, I got the stage, I got the mic for 5 minutes or 1 minute or 12 bars, and I'm gonna tell you guys a little story, right? Like we're all it's just a little story. And same with the composition, like I'm gonna play you four movements or three movements, or here's this cue, or here's this scene. And when you do that, you want to come to it like in the most kind of natural way possible. And to reach that, taking a break, coming back, leaving it. I know it sounds cliche, and
But
I'm sure it's easier said than done. But if you can kind of develop that sensor about yourself and about your brain, and knowing, when you really need a break, that's good. And also, there's like simple rules that I do. Like I basically
hmm,
take a break every like 45 minutes. I'll
okay.
go out for 5 minutes. I'll do a long stretch, like maybe an hour, but I'll usually break for a few minutes. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
it gives
find
you
that
that
helping for me.
elasticity to kind of play around with. Otherwise, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really hard where like you drain everything you could out of it, and then like
Yeah.
now you're forcing creativity. That's
Exactly. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to force it. You want to kind of like find the sweet spot. Now, everybody's different. Some people are able to sit in a room for 12 hours. Some people can do it for 4 hours. I can do it for a long time, but it's like a marathon. So you want to like pace yourself. and
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, when you're doing this professionally and you gotta deliver a film score, for example, you gotta kind of get your composing chops to a point where you can write at least 2 minutes a day, and that could be a lot sometimes. And it's like a muscle, and you find a way to do it, and then kind of like try to keep a smooth pace. You don't want to overdo it, and you don't want to like get to a point where you're struggling. Another trick is to kind of move to a different thing, right? Like it's not working. Look, the mountain is vast. You can climb it from all different ways. So, set up camp here and continue in the morning, or let's go around, and let's keep on moving.
And finding your way. It sounds like like what works for you.
Yes, yes, and
Okay,
it
yeah.
gets easier as you gain confidence in what you do, and then it's just this flow. But the trick is to kind of find, the sweet spot of like the good vibes, the natural kind of creativity that comes in, letting it flow out of you, and then, when you feel like you're losing it, maybe take a break or move on to something else. Kind of try to keep it fresh, and at the same time, you also got to train yourself not to go down every rabbit hole, because there's a lot of times as a creator where you get excited about an idea, but it's not necessarily the best idea for the moment. It's just a fun idea, and
Right.
it becomes a self-indulgent thing. And that's also a dangerous thing when you're working on a timely, on a
Yeah.
timely budget. Sometimes there's just some things you gotta, kill your darlings kind of a thing. Yeah, and not allow yourself to have too much fun.
Well, let's go into that too. You got this amazing poster behind you for a great movie. I had a blast. Let's take this perspective because I'm a storyteller. Musically, that's storytelling. We love stories here. So maybe with this particular film, Scary Movie, I mean, we got the old crew back, we got the Wayans brothers, we got the tonality and music that you brought to it. It gave it fresh, but it feels like we're continuing on like from Scary Movie 2, if that makes sense for everybody. So can you tell me maybe working with the Wayans brothers, working with the director, what is that like? And then what was that challenge? Was it daunting? Like, oh, we're not doing just, hey, just score this film and here's our taste. We're trying to continue on and do something new here as well. So, how do you approach working with the director and then working with the Wayans brothers in this particular project?
I was brought on by our amazing director, by Mike Titus, with whom I'm lucky enough to this is our second collaboration together. Yeah, we did a movie that pretty much no one watched called Half Baked, Totally High,
Okay.
right before this movie a couple of years ago. But we developed a really great rapport, and we have a good shorthand. I think we just kind of see eye to eye when it comes to a lot of things, and just been super fun, kind of like working with your best friend is what it feels like. So Mike was the one who kind of brought me on and pushed for me to score the movie and recommended me to the Wayans, and in particular Marlon was kind of like the producer and kind of in charge of everything. I mean, he wrote it, stars in it, and he was involved in the edit, and then he was involved into music a little bit. And eventually, I got on a call with him, and me and Mike kind of pitched some ideas that I had in mind, and the main one being that we're gonna kind of play it straight. We're gonna play all the music almost like a real horror movie, and when we're nodding to these other films, we're gonna kind of try to get that scope and sound, which worked out great because Mike was really shooting everything, almost shot for shot. I mean, you gotta change it, with parody about 30% or something like that.
Right.
Like it needs to be different. It gave the movie this kind of like contemporary slick look, so it felt natural to kind of match that with like the appropriate score for each one. So that was kind of like something that we came up with early on, and this is how most of the parodies are scored. Like if you look at something like
Oh,
Tropic Thunder, that's just like, a full-on action
yeah.
war adventure score. There's nothing quote unquote like funny about the music. It's not playing any funny music.
Right.
The contrast, same goes to like The Simpsons, or anything that is doing comedy. For the most part, the music is kind of not in on the joke. The music is taking itself seriously, and then the contrast of the seriousness with the joke is what amplifies the humor. But it comes with a caveat, which is the timing of it. A lot of times we need to pull out for the joke. So the recipe is a general recipe, and that's what we kind of presented to Marlon, was that, we're gonna take the score, I'm gonna write a big symphonic score with a full orchestra, as big as the Scream movie scores. In fact, we recorded with the same orchestra that Scream 7 and
Yeah.
Get Out recorded with. So we got this like kind of big blockbuster sound, but we're gonna pull out for the joke, and we're gonna make room for the joke. So that was kind of like the initial discussion, and that's really the guiding principle throughout the movie. So that was one thing, and then the other thing that was important, for Marlon and for me and for Mike, was that we'll have a theme, a new theme that would represent the OGs and would follow them throughout the movie. And they really like the Waynes. They really like the kind of like old school approach with orchestra
Mhm.
and having themes and stuff like that. But at the same time, they come from sketch comedy where you really
Right.
don't have that much music. It's they do stand up, and they're used to just telling jokes. So for them, the using music was a little bit of we had to kind of come up with a way to do it, and at times it became a little bit of a challenge because it's a parody and because we're
Yeah.
trying to look and sound like these movies which have a score. We kind of had to, you can't this is not a stand-up show. This is a cinematic
Right.
experience. So that was kind of the challenge, is finding that balance of how far can we push the music. And what we also found is, like, sometimes to make the humor and to kind of lighten up the moment, it was almost better to make it campy and over the top and play it even more serious than you would, because a lot of these things, they work on familiarity and
Yeah.
something that is recognizable, whether it's a joke or or like an internet meme or something like that. But it also works with the language of film music. So viewers and listeners are so smart today. They've seen so many
No.
shows and
Yeah.
movies that they speak a language that they don't even realize they speak sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you see it on the Netflix subtitles when it says like ominous music,
Yeah,
or you
right.
know and what that does is that it gives the viewer certain cues of like what to anticipate. So we can play with that stuff, and I can give them musical cues that read like death is coming or something's looming around the corner. And I can also play with how much I press on it. Like, that criticism when sometimes people say, you're spoon feeding the viewer. So sometimes we're food spooning, like, on purpose, even harder, to play that trope just to make the joke funnier. So it comes out
Wow.
as campy or over the top or cheesy sometimes. But again, it's to get the joke. It's to really kind of take it. And the thing is that these movies like Scream, they already took it to a parody, to not a parody, I'm sorry, to a satire to
Yeah.
some degree. When you think about Scream in the horror genre,
No.
it's not a pure horror movie. It's a horror. It's almost like a satire about horror movies.
I see
And it
exactly what you
has, and
mean.
it breaks the fourth wall in a way, and it has this meta angle to it, and kind of makes fun of itself with a little wink. So we were making fun of that too. So with the music, you kind of have to go up with these levels. So all of that was like super fun. I mean, I'm kind of breaking it down to, like, like how to think about it, but a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff really happens intuitively. And it's just like kind of putting that music and putting that serious music against something that is completely ridiculous tends out to make things funnier. So that was the overall approach,
Wow.
and it was awesome. Then working with these guys, I mean, it's a dream. This is like, you get
Oh
it's
yeah.
like iconic cast. And I mean, the material I was getting to score, it was just like one thing was funnier than the other. And also, there's different ways, there's many ways to, not one way to skin a cat. So it was just great. It was a really awesome experience. And it's fun to see it now, shared in the world and people laughing. It's such a great feeling to make people laugh. And yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to be a small part of it.
We definitely need more. There's really not a lot of comedies going out, and I'm not sure if that's demographic or just the way society is now, but we do need that. And honestly, that's the great marriage of this is it's the same coin, but like typically comedy and horror, they're different sides of the same coin. To get the shock versus the laugh. And I,
Totally.
I love that because I hear this quite a bit. I understand the mentality as whatever, whether it's a composer or an actor or whatnot. I'm here to service a story, and that's so important. That's what you're thinking going into it. But at the end of the day, the result, it's the story. And I think that's such an important part. Going into this next part, you mentioned earlier, music, it's creating these emotions. It's helping me as the viewer or listener get that empathy into the character and into the scene that's attaching me. And I think what's interesting here, and I would love to in particular apply this concept we're about to talk to Versa. It's a Disney, it's dialogue free animation. It's beautifully done. And I'm sitting there. Obviously, the animation's amazing, the lighting, all that servicing the story, but the music. And there's something about, we all see the behind the scenes in movies. I watch behind the scenes a horror movie or comedy, and the music's not during, like, this doesn't hit the same at all. So let's go into your approach as a composer, bringing that you're telling the story, and you're servicing the emotion that's going there. Like, why? Let's apply this to Versa. What makes that work? If I took your score out of that and I watch Versa by itself, it's still stunning and beautiful. It's not hitting me the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, music is essentially the heartbeat of the film, especially in a movie like Versa. In fact, I have here. Let's see if I
Oh
can.
yeah.
I just got this 2 days ago from Malcolm Pierce, who's the director. He gave me this stunning lithograph of Versa, and then right here he wrote, "Chaim, thank you for giving Versa a heartbeat." So I think that's the answer to your question, right?
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And
Wow.
music is so powerful, and it really can provide the emotion of what you're feeling. This is true about sound. Sound and music is what gives you the feelings of the movie, I think. When done right, it can also, it's hard to get it to work right. That's the art. That's what film scoring is matching. It's not just writing music, it's matching music to picture in a way that would support the narrative, which is storytelling. So we're all storytellers,
Yeah.
and that's what the best film composers are. Some are so good where the music can stand on its own, like John Williams. His music is so incredible that you can listen to it outside the film, and it can evoke the film. It can also evoke other things, though, but that's very, very special. So yeah, I mean, music is really, it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. It really manipulates the feelings in a way that is hard to describe. And also, the music psychology is this very interesting thing of,
Yeah.
when you think about what music can get you to feel on a physical level. Music can get you to have goosebumps,
Yeah.
and it can get you to cry, and it can get you to kind of lose your breath and have a faster heartbeat, faster heart rate. And that's pretty remarkable. And there is a physical element to music because it's being pushed, it's air being pushed in a room, so you also feel it, especially when you're in a theater. You would feel the subwoofers, and you would feel what we call the oomph, the,
Yeah.
the oomph of the music. And that has a physical effect on humans as well, especially if you go to like a nightclub where they have big subwoofers and DJs playing, low 808s,
Yeah.
and
You feel
people
your
are
heart
moving,
moving. Yeah.
shaking their
Literally.
booties. Yeah, it makes them feel sexy, and it makes them feel, because the music, again, it has a physical effect on our bodies. It's very hard to explain why. I've heard different like explanations to it, and one of them being our brain is kind of designed like in animals, and we're kind of always scanning for patterns,
Oh
and we're
yeah.
scanning for what's coming next, almost like as a defense mechanism. So with music, it's the same thing. We kind of expect the chorus to hit, or we expect the melody to land in a certain way because we were taught musically that do re mi fa sol la si
Yeah.
do. So you'd expect that, and if I withhold that, that creates some tension. That's what we call like ending things with a question mark. And there's musical ways to do it. But what happens when we expect something and then we get surprised by it, that can generate that feeling of like my breath is taken, or I'm getting the goosebumps because it's doing what we expected it to do, but not in the way we expected it to do. And that creates this excitement for us, that really is, if I understand, I may be wrong, but it's a little bit of the thrill of danger is what makes it makes us feel like that. So it's a thrill, and all of that stuff is fascinating because all of that really also happens at a very, very subconscious level while we sit at a theater and drink a 2-liter soda.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no one is thinking about it, but yet it's our body is reacting to all that stuff. So I love that, and there's over time you learn with music how to translate all of that stuff into like actual musical tools, like using low notes and drones and things that
Right.
sound low and steady, that can immediately create tension. Even if under our conversation right now, if I started introducing some low ominous music, all of a sudden our conversation would start feeling like it has this another layer to it of what's going on, guys. And if I inserted some like very sweet piano twinkles over it, it would start feeling nostalgic or emotional. And same with high notes. If we put a high, steady note over it, it would start creating some tension and a feeling of like something is coming. And if we wanted to excite things, then we could start putting some sort of drum beat or percussion that would drive the feeling and would literally make our heart rate go faster. So those are all tools that composers use to manipulate the feeling and to again, you want to manipulate the feeling in the way that is best supportive for the story.
Yeah.
And we don't always want you to know the truth about the story. It depends on what, what the narrative is. And if we can trust it.
Yeah. And kind of the other thing, let's apply this. I thought this was a speaking like that tonality and creepiness or whatnot with the taking of Deborah Logan. I remember that, and it was just super haunting. So let's perhaps apply that. You went into it beautifully there, but let's give like a little example here, like the taking of Deborah Logan to I Am Wrath, which has got more of like a thriller kind of vibe versus a horror like tension kind of vibe versus another beautiful score was the Iceman. When you approach a project or a scene or overall film or TV show, what is a good way of looking at that as far as eliciting those tones? You did a great example of do re mi fa. If I sustain this, your approach to composing a scene outside of course director notes like hey we want this,
Yeah.
and maybe perhaps if you could add like a moment where like Steven Spielberg when he had John Williams and he came back with duh, duh, and he's like, okay, this is a joke, right? He's like, no, this is a good idea. Listen, and then other people hear it and they're like, no, Steven, he's onto something. Do you have a moment like that as well?
Yeah, there's many, many. I
Okay.
mean, I will say that the first step is finding out the DNA of the film and
Mm, mm,
the color palette that we need, the musical color palette. I mean, and
music.
that goes hand in hand with the actual color palette of the film itself. So I'm looking at things at the way it's shot, the way it's lit. I'm looking for fabrics. I mean, literal, like what the set design is, what the production looks like. What is it this movie feels like? Does it feel like bright neon lights? Does it feel dark? Does it feel bright? Is it sunny? Is it a cold film? Something like The Iceman was very cold. I mean, it was also vintagey looking, but it was very cold, like the character itself, like, had no heart. And the movie had this like kind of cold look that matched
Take me
and
to that
a
scene,
lot of
like when
blues.
he did that infamous scene where he's like, praying to God. That,
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
like, let's break
Yeah.
that down.
Yeah, I mean, so something like that would start early on by, like I said, by talking about the color palette, and then we in order to get to a scene like that, you have to create some sort of general almost like a presentation or an example of the colors that you're going to use, so almost like a sketch before you can get into that. And that would usually be in the form of a suite, so that's like
Okay.
uh, a long piece of music or a bunch of different ideas that I can then present to the director, and kind of gauge what works. So for something like the Iceman, I was looking to create that cold feeling with the music,
Yeah.
but there's also another thing that is big on that movie is the duality of it. So he's a
Yes.
family man, and he's like normal on one hand. On the other hand, is he's this like crazy psychotic killer, and we wanted that duality in the music as well. So for his like violent side, I used a lot of very distorted pads and bending sounds and things that sound twisted, like twisted metal, and things that would feel obviously dark and scary to a degree, but also twisted and a little unexpected and violent as well. So there's these like big outbursts of violence that he has, and those are also represented in the music. And for the more emotional side, I used an orchestra that represents the warmer side and him being a father and a loving husband to whatever degree he could be. And also by the end of the movie, those two things kind of come together, and the scope of the film gets bigger as the FBI closes in on him. The orchestra gets bigger, and kind of his world, this world that he created, with all the people he was killing and getting involved with all these different groups of mafia, all of that kind of got too big for even him to handle. So that was also representing in the music. And
Wow.
so then, like, when you approach the film, you have to find that sound, you have to find that palette. And then when we do get to a scene like that, one thing it will usually have is a temp score. So it'll have like some sort of temporary soundtrack. Now, that could be a great thing, it could be a horrible thing. I don't remember, not every scene necessarily has a temp score, but there is some temp score, and that kind of already gives you an idea on like at least when the music starts and ends. And sometimes we'll have a discussion. It's called a spotting session where we'll go scene by scene and we'll analyze that scene. And that usually happens with the director and maybe the picture editor. And we'll go over it and discuss what we're trying to achieve from the scene. The best discussions are not about music. They're about story and
Hmm.
about, and a lot of times, like if you ask a director to tell you about the scene or about the movie, they're going to tell you about the things that matter to them, and they're going to usually exclude a lot of other things that might be obvious or just not that important to them. That's kind of a great way to get them to tell you exactly what matters for them. Sometimes it'll be something that they're trying to achieve but wasn't there in the performance, or they didn't get
I
enough
see.
coverage of it, or it feels too slow or whatever. And we'll have that discussion, and then I'll go and write something. Hopefully, I'm not just diving into a scene like, like cold. I'll usually have a period of time beforehand where I'm developing some ideas, even things that I wasn't writing to picture, just like things that I would look at the film and then write some of that suite I was talking about. So I might
Yeah.
already have like a starting idea for a scene like that, or at least I'll have a discussion and I'll have like a variety of sounds available to compose with. So this is a little bit like if you're a painter,
Hmm.
and before you start painting, you gotta kind of set up your station and get all your colors and your brushes. So that's another important step. And that's a creative step as well, because you're really
Hmm.
picking the ingredients of the meal that you're going to cook. And all of that prep helps that moment when you do, back to your question of like break it down to us. So that usually happens very quickly, because like you're like, all right, I know, at this point of the movie, these things happen. So on a scene like that, that's a moment where like protagonist or the anti-hero is um, really toying with the idea that there is no God. He's trying to prove something really for himself more than to James Franco's character in that moment. It's one of the most terrifying moments in the movie also, and it's like very earnest too, because you see this guy begging for his life and like truly believes that maybe God will come down and save him. And then Michael Shannon just like breaks that after about 2 minutes, and he's like, I think God's too busy or something. I think he said God's
So
busy. Is what he
hardcore.
said. Hardcore. So musically, I mean, from what I remember in that scene, obviously it has a build to it, but there was also this almost like a religious. I mean, not almost. He prays to Jesus or whatever. He
Hmm.
prays and he has the cross. So there is an element in the music, from what I remember, that is kind of evoking a hymn like or a prayer like. Again, in our language of the film, which is these synthetic pads and bending notes, there's a feeling like, this is a holy moment almost.
Yeah.
And there's kind of something,
Well, it draws you in too, as
it
the
draws you
viewer.
in. Yeah, it draws you into the scene. Towards the end of it, though, it starts spiraling down. There's a moment where like we kind of push on
Yeah.
Richard's face, and we see that, he's like, he's not coming. He's not coming, and you can kind of tell where it's going. And we're doing a little bit of foreshadowing, maybe in the last 10 seconds, if I remember correctly, where that's about to happen. So, yeah, so that's kind of one of the ways, to handle it and find like whose point of view are we scoring this from? Is it
Right.
from Richard's point of view, or is it from James Franco's point of view?
And that's amazing because we kind of get a very strong vibe like this isn't ending well, but you do obviously pushing in with the camera, the music a lot, like you just mentioned there. I love the concept. Now that you mentioned the hymn, and I'm like, yes, and I'm like, oh, we know this is how ending, but why am I still pulled in? And I love that factor too. It doesn't matter if it's a comedy. I mentioned like this was a haunting film for me was the Taking of Deborah Logan. Like you're creating how you creating that moment as a composer instead of just putting music in there for music's sake. I think that happens quite a bit with scoring, unfortunately. How do you approach that? And then let's maybe go into some common either lessons learned or more importantly, common mistakes you unfortunately see other composers making, where it's like they put music in here for music's sake. It's not fitting. What some common mistakes are you doing? But let's apply it to the Deborah Logan, especially with that cave scene was
Oh yeah, yeah. Which doesn't have music. The cave scene.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the key is finding some like finding the narrative in the music. So, like you said, don't want to just put any music or just music for the sake of music because it feels like awkward or empty. So you want to find something in the music, hopefully that can tie in, even if it's a subtle thing. So in Deborah Logan, because we're dealing with Alzheimer's and memory, I thought it would be interesting to play a piano that sounds like it has these echoes to it, and it's these frozen. I used this kind of virtual instrument piano where the strings were recorded and kind of frozen in time. So it's a piano, but every time you play a note, it sustains as a pad, and then the pad kind of morphs and pitches up and down. The result is that it sounds a little bit like an echo, a faded memory of something.
Oh
So,
yeah.
a great example of something like that is the movie Patton, that Jerry Goldsmith
Mhm.
scored. And in Patton, about General Patton, the main theme from that is this trumpet fanfare that goes like, "Ba, ba, 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 ba,
Yeah.
and you hear this military trumpet, but you hear it through an echo delay that makes it feel like this is what General Patton thinks that, this American heroic memory of the war is, and that's what we connect with, with military sound and funeral sounds and heroes is a cornet, a trumpet, but using it with the echo delay that makes it sound like the memories of war and the foggy memories of the war. And so similar, with that piano in the taking of Deborah Logan, it was the idea of like it's her memories and it's her losing her memories. So that was a way to tie in the storytelling and the narrative with something musical that is using the same ideas, the memory of the piano. Now, again, it's not like when I expect anyone in the theater to go like, "Oh yeah, I hear that, I hear that frozen
Right,
piano
right.
the composer used." Of course not, but I do think that it. Again, I'm using the term subconsciously.
Subconscious, yes.
I feel like that's another layer that helps you get into that state of mind. In that case, it was the idea that it's like, is she just being crazy, or like she's forgetting things, or is she is possessed by something supernatural. And the piano also kind of gave it a quality of like a home film. And I think we even see her playing the piano, or like there's something like it just feels like you're watching an old like home movie, and it feels warm. We do love her. We love Deborah and we love her family. So that felt like a good kind of intro into that world. And then you're right. There's a lot of times it's like, when do you not play the music, and those decisions are very important, especially in that movie because it was a found footage hybrid, so it really shouldn't have any score to it.
Right.
But we kind of cheated it. And I mean, I don't know, sometimes you hear the music, is it the music in the documentary, or is it
Or yeah.
the score, or is it just, what? So I think we kind of figured out a way to do it where like it works, and it adds something to the film, and you just accept it. Again, talking about those unwritten rules that all of us viewers are gaining as we watch movies. So that was great. And then I think you asked about something about a challenge, about something that didn't work, or we had like,
Oh yes.
so I remember actually with Scary Movie, we had a thing with Shorty's introduction. When we first see Marlon's intro, there was originally going to be a song. So I wasn't going to score that moment. They were going to use like a famous hip hop song or something, kind of reads like Weed, and
Yeah.
like iconic, he's back. The song they found was way too expensive to
Okay.
license, and then they try to like find songs that were unfamiliar songs but like similar to it, but they all felt like it just wasn't really working. At some point Mike suggested to the team, like, how about just let Chaim like give it a stab, like see what he can come up with. The song song they were using had this kind of like fanfare in the beginning. So I was like, they're like, whatever you do, they like that. So like maybe start something like a hip hop beat that has like a fanfare in the beginning or something kind of exciting, like an announcement. And I actually thought that, like, I don't think I can like create something because they also wanted it to feel iconic. Like, no pressure,
Yeah, no
just
pressure.
like, hey, write something iconic. It's like 20 seconds long. It's not a long time either. So it's not like you get to develop
But it's still
anything.
got to feel iconic and familiar, though.
Totally. So I had the idea of like, what is the most kind of famous music I can use from the classical repertoire, and I came up with a few things, but the first one that came to mind was Beethoven's Fifth, and putting those notes like ba 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 bum.
Yeah.
Bum, 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 bum is something that everyone would recognize. There were a few other things that I came up with, but I then quickly, it also made me think of Walter Murphy's version called A Fifth of Beethoven, which was in Saturday Night Fever. And that's like a funky version of that. And I thought that was cool because it's like another kind of like, this movie is all about referencing other movies, even though it's a totally different version. But I thought it's like kind of a cool, another kind of added value that this quote would bring. And the best part about it is that it's public domain, so I can actually use it. And unlike, a famous hip hop song where you got to license it, this is something that you can actually use. And I took that and I kind of created a hip hop beat from that sample. And then I presented that to Mike. He loved it immediately. And then we presented it to Rick and to Marlon. And I remember one of them did not like it. Like they were like, I don't know. So they kind of went back and forth. Eventually they put it in a screening and everyone clapped. Everyone loved it. And then it was like, you should give it another try and put it in front of an audience. And yeah, I'm really glad. Like, I feel like it worked out really great. And it gives Marlon or Shorty this like iconic entrance. And it's cool. And it's like original. No one did like, not that I'm aware of, like, like a hip hop flip on Beethoven. The only thing I regret is that I called it on the album track Shorty's Fifth. And I really should have called it Shorty's Eighth for an eighth of weed.
Yeah.
So,
That would have been like right there,
yes, Mike mentioned it, and I was like, "Damn it, you're right."
You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, I think, just talking with you on this, because as an audience, it is, there's a lot of subtext and subconscious. That's what we want, because audiences wanted to figure that puzzle out themselves. They don't, like you said earlier, don't want to be spoon fed. When we're talking about earlier about like, there's no music in the cave for Deborah Logan. And it's like, I realized myself just talking with you, like the piano and all the music leading up to that, that was kind of like holding my hand in my own mind. Like, we're safe. And then when I was gone, and it's just this haunt, it just, there's like noise, but
Yes, yes.
so
You
music
don't get the
creates that.
comfort of a film score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the future here, like, what does that look for you? What aspirations do you have? Whether it's not just projects, of course, or where you want to go next level wise, so on and so forth. What is the your future kind of goals with this now?
I'm very grateful for where I'm at in my career, and I at this point I just want to keep being able to do what I do. And I mean, this is like something I feel like a lot of artists probably feel like it would be great if you didn't have to worry all the time about the next gig and
Yeah.
getting into like a flow where you can always know that you're safe. But I don't know that that actually exists for
Right.
anyone.
Yeah.
So I kind of gave up on that. So at this point, I'm just like, I'm gonna trust the system. And yeah, I mean, I love being able to kind of jump from one thing to another, and I do such different. Right now I'm doing a Disney animated animation project that's so different from Scary Movie. I also do some stuff for the Disney parks, and or I'll do a TV show or a drama.
And do you, real
Um,
quick, Hein, do you love that? Like, is that something you love? The different, like hitting something totally different on that next project than
I
this one?
do.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I think I get bored easily, if I do the
Mm,
same thing.
yeah.
And I also like that's truly my taste. I enjoy all things equally. I mean, music wise, I can listen to, hardcore jazz like Brad Meldo and Keith Jarrett, but I enjoy like like baile funk and trap and Drake and
Yeah.
you name it just as much. I really do. And same with movies. I'll enjoy something like Hereditary, but I'll also enjoy something like a silly Adam Sandler comedy. And
Yeah.
that's why I enjoyed scoring Scary Movie, because we're doing all the different genres. And I have kids now, and I enjoy watching like kids shows with them. So for me, it's awesome, and I do think there's a real kind of creative challenge and real art and real creativity that goes into every genre, from not just what we know as award movies and the kind of like more artsy films. I do think there's a lot of art in something silly like Scary Movie or in a kids animation show. They all have something. Just music and art, it's such a subjective thing. For me, I really truly enjoy everything equally. So for that reason, I'm just always hungry to like learn more and try to, ooh, like let me do some Brazilian music today,
Right.
or whatever the thing is. And I'm also like I'm really obsessed with music, regardless of films. And I'm also very aware of like the news and pop culture and just like what's happening. I love that. But in particular with music, I'm very obsessed with that. So I
Yeah.
can like talk about it and listen to it and consume it all day. The variety for someone like me is great. It just keeps it, you know, I keep feeding me all this stuff
Yeah.
I want to know and do it all.
I think it's so important. The variety is the spice of life, so to speak. It's so important. Another kind of closing thought I just had here is because I think this all the time. Why do you suppose even contemporary music or pop or whatever, everything at some point has its roots in the masters, the classical. Why do you suppose that is? It's not like, I mean, they didn't invent it, but they mastered it to this level. I suppose maybe they were taking it not just to different heights, but like the emotions that are with the story that's being told with no words, let alone with words. Why do you suppose to this day, like that is our foundation?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have the answer to it. It might be something with like there maybe like less noise back then, like you didn't have a phone and people can kind of like really, I feel like, to write like I know for myself to create something, you got to kind of like shut off everything and like just go into, I come into the studio, and I basically live here like a monk for a period of time, and you just have to like fully consume like you just engulf yourself with it, and I feel like maybe back then it was easier because it was people traveled less and they didn't have distractions like TVs and
Yeah.
phones and stuff like that, and maybe I don't know, or maybe there was really just greatness back then. I'm not sure what it is, or maybe it's the fact that they were the first, and like that's what it is. Because I do think like I can't say that there aren't like geniuses around
Right.
today and people that make like really creative things. I think there was like more time and you could be more secluded and more immersive in what you do. And I think also the way like the world changed and how our culture changed and how everything is just fast paced today, that affects it as well. And I think, when you just take your time with things, you can get on a deeper level. And maybe
Yeah.
that's what it is, and maybe just today it's almost like we can't do it anymore because we're just too fast as a society.
It's just set
Um,
up
I
that way. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And maybe also some of it is like romanticizing it, the past.
That's
There are some things like for, music wise, I can definitely say like, Bach and the preludes and fugues and the well-tempered clavier, that is the foundation to all music. And
yeah.
no one even came anywhere near close doing something like that.
It's
It's
crazy.
it's just like these crazy achievements that you see, or like, or like the
Yeah.
wonders of the world. You're like, all right, I have no idea how they build these pyramids, but like they're there, So it's like, yeah, it's true. And no one was able to capture that level of math-like brilliance that Bach did, that
Mhm.
also has the most profound spiritual experience when you listen to it.
Right. Yes.
That's the thing about classical music. It's not just like cleverly put together and like brilliantly, perfect on a mathematical musical theory
Right,
level.
right.
It also, when you listen to Mozart's Requiem or whatever, Beethoven's Fifth, I mean, you listen to God is talking to you now. I mean, it's
Yeah,
heavenly. It's wow, and no one reached that greatness really. And since then, it's quite remarkable. With film music, I do feel like people are constantly pushing the envelope and creating new things, which also stems from Wagner and from opera music and from that place. But and you can also argue that that stuff is not just standing on its own, like you're witnessing a movie. So when we get these
yeah.
moments at the end of Shawshank Redemption or wherever, or E.T. flying, like they are married with the picture. It's not just, you
That's a
know,
great point because, like, my favorite thing to do if I'm getting like work done, I'll put on a soundtrack. Just put on a soundtrack, and it's just I'm literally watching the movie in my mind, like
yeah.
beat for beat. It's just an amazing thing.
Yes. So it comes right. It comes with this package, right? It doesn't. It's not just on its own. So that's why I said earlier, like the film scoring is an art on its own. It's not just
Yeah,
scoring, and it's not just film. It's not just writing music. It's the marriage of those two things, and creating that memorable experience. Which, I would argue also that that comes with another kind of layer of
hmm.
something that is outside of the art itself. Is where were you when you watched the movie? Because a
Yeah.
lot of the memories that we have is, I was sitting in a theater and I was laughing my ass off, or like I remember my dad taking me to see Star Wars when it came out in theaters, or like I remember for me, Haim, I remember seeing Forrest Gump at this like little theater when I was must have been like 12 or 13, and I ran home crying after that. Now I just like wanted to give my mom a hug, and I was like so touched by that movie, but I was also like very excited by it. And I remember that run home in that theater just as much as I do the movie
Right.
itself.
It
So
attaches it
I
to
feel
it.
like that's another thing that goes into consuming these movies. You got to be in the right state of mind, or the piece of music, that album that reminds you of the breakup, or
Right.
that reminds me of college, man. That I listen to that. That reminds me of my buddy Luke. It's this experience, and that's another great thing that we get to do as artists is help people make these memories. The memories, like
Yeah.
that's kind of like what people walk away with, and that's what they'll say, like, that was a great movie, because it created
Yeah.
this memory for them of watching this and in a sense they're remembering them really enjoying the movie more than the movie itself. And a lot of times the next thing you want to do is like send it to a friend, or like bring your friends to watch the movie, and did you see that? Did you see what happened? Like, see them, you expect them to have the same reaction that you did. They don't always do, but I feel like all of that's all like psychological, like psychology that comes with movies and with music, and it's really moments and memories. Those are the things that we can like hold on for 20 years later and be like, that's a
Yes.
great song, because
And that's why
I
we do
listen.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Methods of Fiction. To hear more insights from filmmaking and entertainment industry professionals, subscribe to our video podcast on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to follow us there as well. We look forward to having you join us again on the next episode.